In course of managing the pandemic, a lot has been put under attention on the churches, their services, and the operations. And give us a perspective of the share size and the complexity of the church today as compared to the operational scope of the churches in the past.
Of course, if you look at the Old Testament, the scope of work in the tabernacle and also in the temple was very huge. The tabernacle time, they were moving. And so the Levites were the only one who could move the tabernacle, set it up. They saw to the sacrifices. They saw to all the perfumes that were used for the incense. They did all the sacred work, which was a lot of work. They were health inspectors. They made sure that there was sanitation amongst the people. In fact, the Levites were the hardest working tribe in Israel. And as a result, God, and because they had no land, God gave them a special portion to live by. So the church has always required a lot of people to keep it running. Running a church is a very complicated process and system. Many times people see a church as a very simple organization, but it's a very complicated system because it is relating to human beings and their well-being and welfare. In the New Testament era, the church started as a very simple organization. There were just a few people, and they met in people's homes. But as the numbers grew, and as the persecution ended and the church stabilized, they needed to find ways of meeting in approved places. They couldn't meet in the synagogues because they were almost always kicked away from the Jewish synagogues. And so they started building, and they started using a system of architecture borrowed from the Roman system, which what the Romans would call a community center, became the model for building churches. So you can see that because the church started in the home, fellowshipping and community was very important to them. So the church didn't become a place of ritual necessarily. Ritual was communion was done and baptism, but community, fellowship, coming together, worshiping together was the most important aspect of the life of the early church. That followed into the architecture of churches and running of churches up to today. For us in Ghana, Christianity came to us about 200 or so years ago, and it was foreign. It is the foreign missionaries took up the total work of the church, the financing of the church. We just attended church. They built the churches, they built the schools, they did almost everything. I mean, when you went to church, you were not even required to support the church financially because the missionary was bringing in the money. It was all part of a system interlaced with colonialism and its effect of creating a dependency on us. Of course, after nationalization, most of the missionaries left and the church came into the hands of nationals. In addition to that, Ghanaians started setting up indigenous Ghanaian churches, not missionary-led. That meant that we were taking direct responsibility for the running of the churches. There are different kinds of churches. There are small churches, some of them 10 people, 20 people, and then there are churches of tens of thousands in one gathering congregation. You cannot expect that a 10-group organization will be run as the same as a 10,000 group of people. So it's complex. For us, for example, in Christ Temple, it's a huge congregation, so this church employs over 100 people. And normally when you say that people get shocked, they say, wow, 100. I mean, and they think it's 100 pastors. In fact, the pastors are the least number of people employed. We have accountants, we have clerical staff, we have estate managers, we have HR managers, we have IT people. and they do all of these things, and people say, is there work to be done? I remember a gentleman who was a public servant and had risen very high in the public service, who came to work in our church office. We employed him. And he later on, after working for 2 years, he said to me, Pastor, I have to confess something. I said, what? He said, when I decided to come and work here, I thought I was going to take it easy. I've worked so hard in the public service. I thought this was going to be relaxed and I would just serve God quietly. He said, what I do here is far more demanding than what I've ever done. It's extreme hard work. We're working late hours. There's so much to be done because people think just the preaching is the work of the church. But the church is a people organization. We manage people. And so there's so much that is required to do that effectively. So managing a large church is a very, very involving activity.
That confirms the fact that you said the Levites were the most hardworking people among. So very large churches and churches that are doing very well, you notice that there's a lot of work that goes into running the church itself.
Exactly. So I think I would wish that some people would really spend time in a church office, maybe not every church office, but at least in our church office, and see what goes on, why people come in the morning and close very late in the night, and work throughout. And especially when there are big events happening, it's a very exhausting work. It's not just what the pastor does, it's what the whole team is involved in, who gives so much of their time and their effort to get things done. And I still think that the Levites were the most hardworking tribe in Israel, and I think that church workers are some of the most hardworking people you can find anywhere.